Cyrilda didn't know that the royal summons her sisters accepted on her behalf was a death sentence. She didn't know that 17 Omegas before her had tried to calm the feral prince, and that 12 of them had been carried out in pieces. She didn't know that the Alpha King had watched her from the shadows of the Thornwood Market 3 moons ago, sensing something in her that even she didn't understand. And she certainly didn't know that walking through those palace gates would shatter every lie she'd ever believed about herself, starting with the ones her sisters had spent 22 years drilling into her soul. All she knew, as the carriage rattled over frozen ground, was that Revna and Sybil had finally found a way to be rid of her. "Stop fidgeting." Revna's voice sliced through the silence like a blade across silk. "You're embarrassing us." Cyrilda stilled her trembling hands, pressing them flat against her threadbare skirt. The fabric was coarse, the color of faded gray that matched the winter sky. Her sisters wore velvet, deep crimson for Revna, emerald for Sybil, borrowed from the village elder's wife specifically for this occasion. An occasion to watch me die, Cyrilda thought. But she said nothing. She'd learned long ago that words only gave Revna ammunition. "Remember what we discussed," Sybil added, her tone lighter but no less cutting. "You're representing the family. Our family. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't meet anyone's eyes, and for the goddess's sake, don't do that thing you do." That thing. Cyrilda's chest tightened. She knew exactly what Sybil meant, the warmth that sometimes spread from her palms without permission. The way wounded animals calmed beneath her touch. The night their father's hunting hound had gone mad with fever and snapped at everyone who came near. Everyone except her. The hound had died in her arms, peaceful as a sleeping pup. Revna had beaten her bloody that night, convinced she'd somehow caused the madness just to prove she could cure it. "Are you listening?" Revna's fingers closed around Cyrilda's wrist, squeezing until bone ground against bone. "Yes, I understand." "Good." Revna released her, leaving red marks that would bruise by morning. "Because if you survive this, which you won't, but if you do, and you somehow embarrass this family, I'll make what the feral prince does to you look merciful." The carriage jolted to a stop. Through the frost-clouded window, Cyrilda caught her first glimpse of Ashenmere, and her breath abandoned her completely. The citadel rose from sea-battered cliffs like something carved by the gods themselves. Black stone towers climbed toward churning clouds, their peaks wreathed in mist. The ocean roared below, waves crashing against rocks with a violence that seemed almost hungry. No warmth here, no softness. Just ancient power and the promise of storms. "This is where I'll die." The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something strange and wholly unexpected. Relief. No more fetching water before dawn. No more sleeping in the root cellar when Revna needed her room for guests. No more pretending she couldn't hear them whispering about how their mother had died giving birth to her, how she'd stolen the beauty that should have been theirs, how she was cursed and wrong and better off gone. If she was going to die, at least it would be quick. A guard opened the carriage door and cold air rushed in, carrying salt and something else. Something that made Cyrilda's pulse skip in a way she didn't understand. "The Omegas from Thornwood?" The guard's voice was flat, bored. "Yes." Revna's smile was honey-sweet and entirely false. "We've brought our sister, as requested. She has the gift." The guard's eyes found Cyrilda, really looked at her, and something flickered across his face. Surprise? Pity? She couldn't tell. "This way." Cyrilda climbed down on unsteady legs, the wind whipping her dark hair across her face. She hadn't been allowed to braid it properly. Revna had said it didn't matter. Dead girls didn't need neat hair. The citadel swallowed them whole. Inside, the stone corridors stretched endlessly, lit by torches that cast dancing shadows across walls hung with ancient tapestries. Cyrilda glimpsed battles, coronations, and wolves running beneath blood-red moons. The history of the Valdris kingdom, woven in thread and memory. She was so focused on the tapestries that she almost missed it. A door, slightly ajar, with sounds leaking through. growling, low, constant, inhuman. Then a scream, high and sharp and abruptly silenced. Cyrilda's feet stopped moving. Another one. The guard muttered to a servant passing by. Third this week. Someone tell the healers. Another Omega. Another failure. Another body. Cyrilda's stomach turned to ice. Come on. The guard's hand closed around her elbow, not unkindly. His Majesty wants to see all candidates before they attempt the calming. His Majesty? The Alpha King. Cyrilda had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. Calum Valdris, who'd taken the throne at 19 after his parents were slaughtered by a rival pack. Who'd spent 3 years hunting down every wolf responsible and executing them personally. Who ruled with iron resolve and, according to the whispers, hadn't smiled since the night his younger brother went feral. They said he was brutal, brilliant, broken in ways that made him dangerous. They said he had eyes like a winter sky, pale and cold and capable of freezing you where you stood. They said he was looking for a miracle, and my sisters sent me to be his sacrifice instead. The guard stopped before a massive oak door, its surface carved with wolves mid-hunt. Wait here. He disappeared inside, leaving Cyrilda alone with her sisters. Revna leaned close, her perfume cloying. Remember, little mouse, when you fail, and you will fail, try to die quickly. I'd hate for you to suffer. The smile she gave was the cruelest thing Cyrilda had ever seen. And then the door opened. The throne room was smaller than Cyrilda expected, but no less imposing. Stone pillars lined the walls, their surfaces etched with names. Hundreds of them, thousands maybe, climbing toward a vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. The names of the dead, she realized. Every wolf who'd fallen defending Valdris, and at the far end, seated on a throne carved from the bones of ancient wolves, was him, Calum Valdris. Cyrilda's heart forgot how to beat. He wasn't just powerful. He was devastating. Dark hair fell across a face that could have been sculpted from the same stone as his citadel. Sharp jaw, sharper cheekbones, lips pressed into a line that suggested he'd forgotten how to smile years ago. He wore black leather and silver chains, and his presence filled the room like a physical weight, pressing against her chest until breathing became an act of defiance. But it was his eyes that truly undid her. Pale gray, glacier cold, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to run and kneel in equal measure. Look away, her instinct screamed. You're an Omega. He's a king. Look away. She couldn't. Something in his gaze held her pinned, something beyond dominance, beyond rank. Recognition. As if he was seeing someone he'd been searching for without knowing it. Leave us. 2 words. Quiet. Absolute. Revna sputtered. Your Majesty, we're her sisters. Surely. I said leave. The temperature in the room dropped. Cyrilda felt it in her bones. The Alpha command, heavy and irresistible. Her sisters bowed jerkily and fled, the door slamming shut behind them. Silence. Calum rose from his throne, and Cyrilda realized with a jolt how tall he was, easily a head above her, broad-shouldered and moving with the controlled grace of a predator who saw no point in hurrying. Why would he? Nothing escaped him? He circled her slowly, and she felt his gaze like a physical touch, trailing over her patched dress, her wind-tangled hair, and the bruises on her wrist that Revna's grip had left. They hurt you. Not a question. Cyrilda's voice came out smaller than she intended. It's nothing, Your Majesty. It's not nothing. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell him, pine and smoke and something wild that made her wolf stir for the first time in years. Your sisters, they did this? She said nothing. Couldn't. A lifetime of silence had sealed her throat. Calum studied her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, his expression softened. Just a fraction. Just enough to make him look almost human. I'm not going to hurt you, Cyrilda. Her name. He knew her name. How? I make it my business to know who enters my home. He moved toward a table near the window where a pitcher of water sat beside 2 cups. He poured one, brought it to her, waited until her trembling fingers wrapped around it before stepping back. He served me, she thought, dazed. A king served me water. Drink, you're pale. She drank, tasting nothing, feeling everything. Calum returned to the table and leaned against it, arms crossed, waiting, watching. You've heard what happens to Omegas who attempt the calming, he said eventually. Yes. And you came anyway. I didn't have a choice. The words escaped before she could stop them, and she braced for anger, for dismissal. Instead, something dark flickered across his face. Your sisters volunteered you. She stopped. How did you know? Because I've watched you. He said it simply, without apology. 3 moons ago, in the Thornwood Market, a cart horse spooked, nearly trampled a child. You stepped in front of it, an Omega, unarmed, facing 1,000 pounds of panicked animal, and you touched its neck. The horse stopped mid-rear, stood there like a lamb while you whispered in its ear. Cyrilda's blood chilled. You were there? I was looking for someone with your gift. A gift rare enough that most believe it's legend. He paused. An Omega who can calm any wolf, no matter how far gone. They call it the shepherd's grace. No, I don't. Yes, you do. His voice gentled, but his eyes held hers with unshakable certainty. You've been hiding it your whole life, making yourself small, invisible, because you know what happens to Omegas with power. They get used, controlled, broken. Cyrilda's chest constricted. Everything he was saying was true, every single word. So I kept watching, Calum continued, followed whispers about a healer in Thornwood who could soothe feral dogs with a touch, a girl who brought dying animals back from the brink. I needed to be sure before I acted. Sure of what? That you were real. He pushed off the table, moving toward her with slow deliberation, and that you might be willing to help me save my brother. The feral prince, Vesper. Cyrilda's mouth went dry. The others who tried failed. Some died. Some survived. But barely. His jaw tightened. I won't lie to you, Cyrilda. What I'm asking is dangerous. My brother hasn't recognized anyone in 3 years. He's more beast than man now. Locked in the Eastern Tower because I can't bear to... He stopped. Swallowed. The crack in his armor was brief, but she saw it. Pain. Raw and ragged. A king who would do anything to save his brother, and who'd been failing every single day. I'll do it. The words left her mouth without permission. Calum's eyes snapped to hers, searching. You understand what you're agreeing to? You need someone to calm him. I have the gift. She straightened, something unfamiliar sparking in her chest, not quite courage, but maybe its distant cousin. Tell me what to do. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then something shifted in his expression. Surprise bleeding into something warmer, something like hope. Not today. You'll rest first. Eat. Recover from whatever hell your sisters put you through. He held up a hand when she tried to protest. This isn't negotiable. I won't send an exhausted Omega into that tower. Vesper deserves better than a sacrifice. He deserves a real chance. And you, his eyes seemed to say, you deserve better too. There's one more thing. Calum reached into his coat and withdrew a small silver ring, simple but elegant, engraved with the Valdris crest. If you do this, if you truly try to help my brother, I'll give you something in return. I don't need your freedom. The word landed like a stone in still water. Your sisters signed a contract when they volunteered you. Did you know that? Ice filled her veins. What contract? Standard Omega indenture. If you fail, the debt passes to them. If you succeed, you become property of the crown. His expression darkened. They sold you, Cyrilda, for 40 gold pieces and a letter of recommendation to the autumn ball. 40 gold pieces. That was her worth. Her entire life, reduced to the price of a decent horse. But I'm tearing up that contract. Caleb placed the ring on the table between them. Help my brother and you walk free. Not as crown property, not as your sister's burden. Free. With enough gold to go anywhere, be anyone. She stared at the ring. Why would you do that? Because I've spent 3 years watching people treat my brother like a monster instead of a victim. I know what it's like to see someone you love reduced to something less than human. His voice dropped. And because I can see what your sisters have done to you. The way you flinch when someone moves too fast. The way you speak like you're waiting to be struck. I won't add to that. Cyrilda's throat tightened. When had anyone last offered her kindness without expecting blood in return? What if I fail? Then you still go free. I won't punish you for trying. And if I die? Caleb's jaw tightened. Then I'll bury you with honor and spend the rest of my life regretting that I didn't find you sooner. She picked up the ring. It was warm from his touch, the metal smooth against her fingers. The moment their skin brushed, his hand against hers as he steadied the ring, everything changed. Lightning. That was the only word for it. A bolt of heat that shot from her fingertips straight to her heart, igniting something ancient and undeniable. Her wolf surged forward with a howl she felt in her very marrow, and the word that blazed through her mind wasn't a thought, but a knowing. Mate. Caleb went rigid, his breath caught, his pupils swallowed the gray of his irises until his eyes were nearly black. He felt it too. Neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Then, slowly, carefully, Caleb released her hand and stepped back. His control was iron, but she could see the cracks, the slight tremor in his fingers, the pulse hammering in his throat. We'll discuss this later, he said, his voice rough as gravel. After you've rested. After you've had time to think. But later. The word was gentle but final. You deserve choices, Cyrilda. Not bonds forced in desperate moments. Not a king claiming you before you've even learned your own worth. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the iron handle. Welcome to Ashenmere, he said without turning. Try not to let it break you. Then he was gone, and Cyrilda was left standing alone in the throne room, clutching a silver ring and wondering if she'd just found salvation, or walked into an entirely different kind of trap. The room they gave her was larger than the entire cottage she'd shared with her sisters. Cyrilda stood in the doorway, unable to move, taking in the canopied bed draped with furs, the fireplace already crackling with warmth, the copper tub in the corner filled with steaming water that smelled of lavender and something sweeter. Fresh clothes hung on a wooden rack, soft wool in deep blue, nothing like the rags Revna permitted her to wear. Is it not to your liking? She startled. A woman stood behind her, middle-aged, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pinned beneath a simple cap. Her smile was warm in a way that made Cyrilda's chest ache. I'm Marin. His Majesty asked me to attend to you personally. She stepped past Cyrilda into the room, moving with brisk efficiency. The bath is fresh. There's food coming. Proper food. None of that gruel they serve in the barracks. And if you need anything at all, you pull that cord by the bed. I don't understand. Cyrilda's voice cracked. I'm just an Omega. I shouldn't. You're a guest. Marin turned, her gaze sharp but not unkind. More than that, if I'm reading His Majesty correctly, which I usually am. 40 years in the Citadel teaches you to see what people try to hide. Guest. No one had ever called her that. Now come. Marin gestured toward the bath. You're filthy, half-starved, and those bruises need salve. Let's get you sorted before dinner. Cyrilda let herself be led like a child. The warm water was heaven against her aching muscles, and she nearly cried when Marin began gently working tangles from her hair with a fine-toothed comb. The other Omegas, Cyrilda managed. The ones who tried before me. What happened to them? Marin's hands stilled briefly. Some survived. They're being cared for in the healer's wing. Others? She sighed. Prince Vesper isn't cruel, child. Not truly. But the feral madness. It doesn't let him see friend from foe. He attacks because he's terrified, trapped in his own mind with no way out. How did it happen? The madness? Marin resumed combing, her strokes slower now. 3 years ago, during the attack that killed the king and queen, Prince Vesper was only 16. He watched his mother die, watched the enemy wolves tear her apart while he was held back, forced to see everything. Her voice dropped. Something in him broke that night. His wolf took over to protect him, and it never gave control back. Cyrilda's heart clenched. 16. He'd been just a boy. His Majesty has tried everything, Marin continued. Healers, mystics, omegas with calming gifts. Nothing works. But he won't give up. Every month, he visits the tower, sits outside Vesper's door and talks to him for hours, even though Vesper just howls and claws at the walls. He loves his brother. More than anything. Marin helped Cyrilda from the tub, wrapping her in a towel softer than clouds. That's why he's desperate enough to hope you're different. Different. Cyrilda had spent her whole life being told she was different, and it had never been a compliment. But maybe here, in this strange fortress by the sea, different could mean something else. The food arrived as Marin promised. Roasted chicken, root vegetables glistening with butter, bread still warm from the ovens, and a honey cake that made Cyrilda's eyes water. She ate until her stomach ached, unaccustomed to fullness. Later, a maid brought tea. Chamomile, she said. But something smelled wrong, bitter beneath the sweetness, like crushed seeds that didn't belong. Cyrilda lifted the cup to her lips, then paused. Her instincts prickled, that quiet warning she'd learned to trust. She set the cup aside, untouched. That night, she curled beneath the furs and slept deeper than she had in years. She woke to darkness and the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy, deliberate, multiple sets. Cyrilda slipped from the bed, padding silently to the door. She pressed her ear against the wood, straining to hear. Can't keep delaying. A man's voice, aged but commanding. The council grows restless. If you won't declare Vesper dead, then name another heir. My brother is alive. Calum. Cold fury threaded through every syllable. He's a beast, nephew. A danger to everyone. The longer you keep him breathing, the weaker you appear. Nephew. Cyrilda's pulse quickened. I won't have this argument again, Corvin. And I won't watch you destroy everything your father built for the sake of sentiment. A pause. The new Omega. Where did you find her? Thornwood. Ah. The village where 12 sheep were found dead last month. Torn apart by something unnatural, according to the reports. Cyrilda's blood ran cold. She remembered that night. The screaming. Revna blaming her, insisting she'd somehow drawn the predator to their lands with her wrongness. What's your point? Calum's voice had turned dangerous. Nothing. Merely an observation. Corvin's tone was silken. I hope this Omega is everything you believe her to be. For all our sakes. Footsteps receded. A door slammed somewhere distant. Cyrilda backed away from her door, heart pounding. Corvin, the king's uncle, a man who spoke of killing Vesper as casually as discussing the weather. A man who wanted the throne enough to suggest it. She filed the name away, instinct prickling. Something about his voice, the smooth, practiced cadence, reminded her of Revna when she was plotting. Be careful, her mother's voice whispered from memory. Wolves don't always show their teeth before they bite. The next morning, Calum summoned her. She found him in a smaller chamber off the throne room, maps spread across a massive table, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept. He looked up when she entered, and something behind his eyes gentled before he locked it away. You heard the conversation last night. It wasn't a question. Of course he knew. He probably smelled her fear through the door. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I know. He straightened, rolling his shoulders like they carried weights she couldn't see. My uncle has been pushing for me to declare Vesper dead since the madness took hold. With Vesper gone, I would need to name an heir. Corvin has a son. Ambitious, hungry. And if you died without an heir, Corvin's line would take the throne. Calem's jaw tightened. He's never been patient. Even when my father was alive, he whispered about succession, about securing the line. My father ignored him. I've tried to do the same. But now he's pushing harder. Because he senses weakness. Calem moved to the window, staring out at the churning sea. Every Omega who fails makes me look desperate. Every month that passes without improvement makes the council question whether I'm fit to rule. He paused. Corvin has allies. More every year. If something happened to me, he'd let Vesper rot. He'd have Vesper killed within the hour. Calem turned back to her, and she saw the weight of it. The exhaustion, the grief, the impossible burden of holding everything together alone. That's why I need you to succeed, Serilda. Not just for Vesper. For everything. She stepped closer without meaning to. I'll try. I'll do everything I can. I know. His voice softened. That's what terrifies me. Why? Because I've watched 17 Omegas walk into that tower believing they could help. And I've watched most of them carried out broken. He closed the distance between them, stopping just short of touching. You're different. I felt it the moment our hands touched, but different doesn't mean invincible. The bond hummed between them, that impossible connection she didn't understand but couldn't deny. When do I try? Tomorrow. Midday, when he's calmest. Calem's hand rose, hesitated, then settled against her cheek. Feather light, impossibly tender. I'm sending Ronan with you. My best guard. He'll pull you out if anything goes wrong. And if it goes right? Then I'll owe you more than gold and freedom. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I'll owe you my brother's life. Serilda leaned into his touch before she could stop herself. What about the bond? What you said about not claiming me? I meant it. His voice roughened. The bond doesn't change your choices. If you help Vesper and walk away, I'll let you go. It'll feel like carving out my own heart. But I'll let you go. And if I don't want to walk away? Calem's eyes darkened. Then we'll have a very different conversation. After Vesper is safe. After you've had time to understand what you'd be choosing. He dropped his hand, stepping back, and she felt the loss like a physical ache. Marin will bring you to the tower tomorrow. Rest today. Eat. Prepare yourself however you need to. He paused at the door. And Serilda? Whatever happens, thank you. For being brave when you didn't have to be. He left before she could respond. Serilda stood in the empty chamber, the maps blurring before her eyes, and thought about everything that had changed in less than 2 days. A death sentence had become an opportunity, a prison had become a refuge, and a king who should have terrified her had instead looked at her like she mattered. Tomorrow, she would walk into the Eastern Tower, face a feral prince who'd killed 12 Omegas, try to do the impossible. And somewhere in this citadel, a man named Corvin was watching, waiting, hoping she would fail. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video. It helps the story reach more people, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Serilda moved to the window, staring at the tower rising against the storm-dark sky. Behind those walls, a boy who'd watched his mother die was waiting. She pressed her hand to the glass. I'm coming, Vesper. Hold on. The Eastern Tower smelled of iron and despair. Serilda climbed the spiral staircase behind Ronan, each step echoing off walls that seemed to press closer the higher they went. Torch brackets lined the stone, but half of them had been torn from their moorings, gouged out by claws, she realized, her stomach tightening. He does that when he's agitated, Ronan said, catching her gaze. The guard was massive, built like a battering ram, but his voice was surprisingly gentle. Tears at anything he can reach. The maids stopped coming up here after the third one ended up in the healer's wing. How often does he hurt people? Only when they get too close. Ronan paused at a heavy iron door, reinforced with bands of silver. The Omegas who tried before, they went in thinking soft words and gentle touches would be enough. They didn't understand. Understand what? That he's not just feral, Ronan's jaw tightened. He's grieving, has been for 3 years. His wolf won't let him surface because surfacing means feeling everything he saw that night. Cyrilda's chest ached. She'd spent her whole life burying her own pain, making herself small to survive. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, what it meant to hide inside yourself because the world was too cruel to face. I'm ready. Ronan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll be right here. You scream? I'm through that door in seconds. And if I can't scream? His expression flickered. Then I pray to the goddess I'm fast enough anyway. He unlocked the door. The room beyond was larger than she'd expected. A full chamber, not a cell. But the luxury meant nothing. Tapestries hung in shreds. Furniture had been reduced to splinters. Deep gouges marked every surface, and the smell of blood lingered beneath the iron tang. In the far corner, a shape huddled in the shadows. Cyrilda stepped inside. The door clanged shut behind her. Don't run, don't show fear. He'll sense it. She moved slowly, carefully, the way she'd approached wounded animals her entire life. One step, then another. The shape in the corner shifted, and she caught a glimpse of matted dark hair, pale skin stretched over two sharp bones. Vesper. He was thinner than she'd imagined, younger looking despite being 19. His clothes were torn, his feet bare, and when he lifted his head, his eyes were pure wolf, gold and wild and utterly empty of recognition. A growl rumbled from his chest. I know, Cyrilda said softly, sinking to her knees to make herself smaller. I know you're scared. I know everything hurts. The growl deepened. He shifted, muscles coiling. I'm not here to hurt you, Vesper. I'm not here to make you do anything. She held out her hand, palm up. Vulnerable. An offering. I just want to help. If you'll let me. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The gold eyes tracked her hand, her face, her throat. Calculating. Hunting. Then he lunged. Cyrilda didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't breathe. Vesper's clawed hand stopped an inch from her throat, trembling with barely contained violence. Up close, she could see the scars on his arms, some from battles, others clearly self-inflicted. The damage of 3 years spent at war with himself. I know, she whispered again. I know what it's like to want to disappear, to be so tired of hurting that you'd do anything to make it stop. Something flickered in those gold eyes, a crack in the emptiness. Slowly, impossibly, Cyrilda raised her hand and pressed her palm against his chest. Heat bloomed from her fingertips, that strange warmth she'd spent her whole life suppressing. It flowed out of her and into him, carrying everything she couldn't say. You're not alone. You're not a monster. Someone sees you. Vesper's growl cut off. His body went rigid. And then, so quietly she almost missed it, a word. Hurts. Cyrilda's vision blurred with unshed tears. I know, but you're still here. You survived. Can't stop seeing. You don't have to stop. You just have to let someone help you carry it. The gold in his eyes flickered, and for one brief, shining moment, she saw something else beneath. Gray. Human. Vesper. Then his legs buckled and he collapsed against her, unconscious but breathing. The feral tension had drained from his body, leaving him limp and somehow smaller than before. The door burst open. Ronan stood in the threshold, blade drawn, ready to kill. He's okay, Cyrilda managed, her voice shaking. I think he's okay. Caleb found her in the garden an hour later, sitting on a stone bench beneath a skeletal winter tree. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling, and she'd wrapped them in her skirt to hide it. Ronan told me what happened. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. You did something no one else could. He spoke. Cyrilda's voice cracked. 3 years of silence, and he spoke to me. Because you reached him. Caleb's hand covered hers, stilling the tremors. You didn't try to force him. You just saw him. I know what it's like to be invisible, to want someone to look at you and actually see. I see you, Cyrilda. She looked up, and the raw honesty in his eyes stole her breath. I've seen you since the moment you stepped into that market and faced down a panicked horse with nothing but your bare hands. I saw you when you agreed to come here, knowing it might kill you. I see you now, exhausted, shaking, and still thinking about my brother instead of yourself. Calum. I know I promised not to claim you. I know you need time. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just the bond talking. This isn't instinct or magic or whatever the old stories say. His voice dropped, rough and unguarded. I am falling in love with you, Cyrilda, the woman who walks into impossible situations because someone needs help. The woman who looks at my broken brother and sees someone worth saving. I'm falling, and I don't want to stop. Her heart stuttered. No one had ever said those words to her. No one had ever looked at her like she was something precious instead of something to be used. I'm terrified, she admitted. I don't know how to be what you need. You already are. He cupped her face, tilting her chin up. Just be yourself. That's all I want. Cyrilda closed the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, questioning. But when his arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, something ignited. She kissed him harder, pouring in everything she couldn't say. The loneliness, the hope, the desperate want for something real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Calum pressed his forehead to hers. Stay, he breathed. Not because of the bond, not because of gratitude. Stay, because you want to. I want to, she whispered back. More than I've ever wanted anything. His smile was like sunrise after years of darkness. They didn't see the figure watching from the shadows of the colonnade. Corvin stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression carved from stone. He'd hoped the Omega would fail, had ensured she would fail, bribing the kitchen maid to lace her tea with Fenris root, a poison that dulled Omega gifts and made wolves sluggish. But she hadn't drunk it, which meant his plans required acceleration. He turned and walked toward the eastern corridor, where a messenger waited with news from Thornwood. News about Cyrilda's sisters, and the information they'd been only too happy to provide. Enjoy your happiness while it lasts, little Omega, he thought. By tomorrow, you'll wish you'd died in that tower. Cyrilda woke to screaming. She was out of bed before her mind caught up, feet hitting cold stone as she ran toward the sound. The corridor was chaos. Servants shouting, guards running, the acrid smell of smoke curling through the air. What's happening? She grabbed a passing maid. The tower! The girl's face was white with terror. Someone set fire to the eastern tower, the prince. Cyrilda didn't wait to hear more. She ran, barefoot and still in her nightdress, through corridors that blurred past. The smoke thickened as she climbed, burning her lungs, stinging her eyes. She could hear Vesper howling, not the feral rage of before, but something worse, fear. The tower door hung open, flames licking the frame. Through the smoke, she saw him, pressed against the far wall, surrounded by fire, his eyes wild with panic. Vesper! She plunged through the doorway. The heat was suffocating, flames dancing across what remained of the furniture. Vesper's howls had turned to whimpers, his body trembling as the fire closed in. I'm here. Cyrilda reached him, pulling him toward the window where the air was cleaner. I've got you. Just breathe. Can't. He was hyperventilating, his eyes flickering between gold and gray. Fire, like before. They burned. His mother. The attack. Wolves burning alive. I know. She pressed her palm to his chest, letting that warmth flow. But you're not there anymore. You're here. With me. And I'm not going to let anything happen to you. A beam groaned overhead. Sparks showered down. They had seconds. Slowly, his breathing steadied. The gold receded from his eyes. Cyrilda. His voice was rough from disuse, but it was his voice. Human. Present. You came back. Of course I did. A crash behind them, part of the ceiling giving way. Flames roared higher, hungry and consuming. The window, Vesper said, suddenly alert. There's a ledge. If we can... He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the opening. Below, she could see the sea churning against the cliffs, black water and white foam. The ledge he'd mentioned was barely a foot wide, running along the tower's exterior toward a servant's staircase. Go, she urged. I'm right behind you. Vesper climbed out, moving with a grace that surprised her. She followed, the wind whipping her hair, her fingers finding purchase on ancient stone. The fire roared behind them, heat pressing against her back like a living thing. Stone crumbled beneath her foot. She slipped. Vesper's hand shot out, catching her wrist, hauling her back against the wall. I've got you, he said. I've got you. They made it to the staircase just as the tower's upper floor collapsed entirely, sending a pillar of flame and debris into the night sky. At the bottom, Calum was waiting. He grabbed Serilda the moment her feet touched solid ground, pulling her into an embrace so tight she could barely breathe. His whole body was shaking. I thought... His voice broke. I thought I'd lost you both. We're okay. She pulled back to look at him, registering the soot on his face, the raw terror in his eyes. We're okay. Then she saw Corvin. He stood at the edge of the crowd, his expression carefully arranged in concern. But something was wrong. His clothes were immaculate, no soot, no sign of panic, and his eyes, when they met hers, held something cold and triumphant. The fire started in the eastern corridor, a guard reported to Calum. Oil-soaked rags, hidden behind a tapestry. Deliberate, Your Majesty. Find who did this, Calum growled. I already know. Serilda's voice was steady despite the fury building in her chest. It was him. She pointed at Corvin. Silence fell. That's a serious accusation, Corvin said smoothly. From an Omega who's been here mere days. You poisoned my tea yesterday. Fenris root. I recognized the bitter smell beneath the chamomile. She stepped toward him. You wanted me to fail with Vesper. When that didn't work, you decided to kill us both. Corvin's mask slipped, just for a second. You have no proof. Actually, she does. The voice came from behind Corvin. He turned and found himself facing Vesper. The prince was still weak, still fragile, but his eyes were clear and his voice was steady. In his hand, he held a crumpled piece of parchment. I found this in the chaos. Fell from your coat when the guards grabbed you during the evacuation. Vesper's jaw tightened. A letter from her sisters. They've been feeding you information about Serilda since before she arrived. Her gift, her weaknesses, how to break her. Signed, sealed, and damning. Corvin's face went pale. Guards, Calum said quietly. The word was ice. Take him. The trial was swift. Evidence mounted. The letter, the bribed kitchen maid who confessed everything, witnesses who'd seen Corvin meeting with suspicious figures in the weeks before Serilda's arrival. The council, so long swayed by his influence, turned on him completely. Corvin was executed at dawn. Serilda didn't attend. Her sisters received their own justice, stripped of their family name, banished from Thornwood, forbidden from ever entering Valdris lands again. The last Serilda heard, they were scrubbing floors in a distant tavern, their borrowed velvet long since pawned. She couldn't bring herself to feel sorry for them. In the weeks that followed, Vesper made remarkable progress. Still fragile, still haunted, but present in a way he hadn't been for 3 years. He ate with the household now, spoke in full sentences, even smiled sometimes when he thought no one was watching. Thank you, he said one morning, finding Serilda in the garden, for not giving up on me. Thank you for saving my life on that ledge. She smiled. We're even. We're family. He said it simply, like a fact. That's what Calum says, and I'm inclined to agree. Family. The word wrapped around her heart and held tight. That evening, Calum found her on the battlements. Their spot now, where the wind carried salt, and the stars seemed close enough to touch. I have something for you, He withdrew a scroll, sealed with the Valdris crest. Your official release from any obligation to the crown. You're free, Cyrilda. Completely and legally. She took the scroll, but didn't open it. And if I don't want to leave? His breath stalled. Then I would ask you to stay, not as a servant or a healer, as my partner, my equal, my mate, if you'll have me. The bond hummed between them, warm and sure. But it wasn't the bond that made her answer. It was the way he looked at her. The way he'd looked at her from the very beginning, like she was someone worth seeing. I spent my whole life being told I was worthless, she said softly. Then you saw something no one else did. I saw you. You saw me. Her throat tightened. And you didn't look away. She kissed him then, soft and fierce and full of promise. Yes, she breathed against his lips. I'll stay. I'll be yours, Calum, and you'll be mine. His arms wrapped around her, lifting her off her feet, spinning her under the stars while they both laughed. They bonded under the next full moon, with Vesper standing beside them and the entire kingdom as witness. Their vows were simple, promises of partnership, of choice, of love freely given. When the bond snapped fully into place, Cyrilda felt it like coming home. Not a chain, not a trap, a bridge, connecting them while leaving room for each to stand whole. Later, they lay tangled together, moonlight spilling across the bed. Tell me something, Calum murmured. Something I don't know. Cyrilda smiled. When my sisters put me in that carriage, I thought I was going to die. I thought this was the end of everything. And now? Now I know it was the beginning. She pressed closer. They sent me here to destroy me. Instead, I found you. Found Vesper. Found a family I never knew I needed. Calum's arms tightened around her. They tried to break you. They failed. She closed her eyes, letting peace wash over her. Her sisters had sent her to serve the Alpha King, expecting her to die forgotten and alone. Instead, she'd found her mate, saved his brother, exposed a traitor, and become a queen. Fair trade, she thought, smiling as sleep claimed her. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.